Hello and welcome back to my office. I know you can't see much of the office apart from a screen, keyboard and this little thing that I teased yesterday in a short video. These weird, I can't remember what these plugs are called, MIDI plugs. These are MIDI plugs. I didn't even realise that these were used for video. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're used for audio as well. I suppose this is a multi-function switcher, but obviously this has these VGA connectors here. And then of course so this is supposed to have a dial on it. You can see that is selectable between two positions. Now when I first found this, discovered it on a job node. As you can see, it was part of a CCTV system. It was no longer being used. It had been discarded to the side, collecting dust, and I was quite intrigued by it because the colour alone is the kind of colour that you used to see on computers back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I figured it's not being used, it's going to go in the bin, I might as well take it, open it up and see what it's all about. See what wizardry exists inside of here to select ports. And I'm guessing these are, as that's an I/O port, it's two ways. You can either have two things feeding, or say two computers feeding into one screen, selected by both, or two screens, one computer, and then you switch between screens, although the latter example are being quite useless. Anyway, I'm going to stop mumbling. Let me find my trusty two-way screwdriver. Let's open this up and see what is inside. Moment of truth. And there we have it. So realistically speaking, there is zero wizardry. There are no ICs, there are no passive components doing anything special. So these are just dozens of wires soldered from the pins, as you can see there, on the MIDI ports and the VGA ports onto the various points on here. You can see that there are actually a few spares. So all this is doing is essentially switching, I'm going to guess, the middle row of pins. So there are 3 rows of pins and it's just latching onto one or the other. I imagine there's some sort of a bit like a clutch, a ring mechanism that makes the connection one way or the other. If anything, this is a bit disappointing because it's like a very, very analog version of what can probably be done in a very compact digital format, because there's not even any real clever workings going on here. It is just switching connectors. It's basically connecting that to that or that to that. But then again, I suppose VGA and MIDI being analog anyway, it doesn't need any more than that. Although I would hate to have seen the labour bill for the assembly of soldering all of these points on there, keeping track of all the wires and then soldering all of these in there and there, etc. And then obviously assembling it. And then you've got the time spent for pressing and bending this outer case. There's that. Now I did say that I was going to use the VGA output on this to connect to multiple monitors and check that that switch is indeed working. There it is. The only thing is, I don't appear to have any more VGA cables. I used to have a collection of them. They were all thrown away with the last spring clean, sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm not going to go through the trouble of buying 2 or 3 VGA cables just for the sake of seeing whether this works. I'm sure that works. That's as analog as it gets. There's nothing that can fail in there short of cutting one of the wires. This experiment, now that I know what that is in detail, has kind of rendered itself useless. I am building this up into a development server for something else. More on that eventually. Obviously I've got this DVI to HDMI connector for connecting it to a more modern monitor, so we'll do that at some point. But I think that's it for this box. I'm going to throw this in the bin. I don't really see any need for keeping this. Unless you really want it, drop a comment below, let me know, and let's make a deal.